I've never had that kind of voice. My voice is very medium range, so
Ray Charles didn't just sing the truth, he spoke it too. And before he passed, he dropped a list. Not of hits, but of the 7 artists he couldn't stand. Today, we're breaking down the raw, unfiltered side of Ray Charles' life and the music industry names that made his skin crawl. Tragic beginnings. Ray Charles didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He barely had a clean fork. Born in 1930 in Albany, Georgia, Ray entered the world in the middle of a family scandal that would have made daytime soaps look tame. His mother, Aretha, had a hard life from the jump. After losing her mom young age, she was raised by a man who later assaulted her. Ray was the result of that trauma. Yep, Ray Charles started his life with more pain in the first year than most folks face in a decade. After his birth, Aretha took him back to Greenville, Florida, where they lived with Bailey's wife, who had just lost a child of her own. So, yeah, things were complicated. But through it all, Ray's mom was his rock. She didn't have much, but she had grit, pride, and an endless hustle that Ray would carry with him for life. As a little kid, Ray was obsessed with machines. He'd watch neighbors fix engines like it was a live concert, but music had him early. By age 3, he was hanging out at Wiley Pittman's Red Wing Cafe, where Pittman played boogie woogie on a battered upright piano. That sound lit something up in Ray. Pittman saw the spark and taught him how to play, even letting Ray and his mom crash at the cafe when money got tight. Real community love. But tragedy wasn't done with Ray. His younger brother George drowned in a tub when Ray was just 5. And not long after that, Ray started losing his sight, completely blind by 7. Most folks would have folded. Ray picked up instruments instead. Thanks to his mom's persistence, he landed at the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind, where he learned not just piano, but clarinet, sax, trumpet, and even classical music. Ever tried learning Bach and Braille? It's like solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, which, to be fair, Ray actually did. He mastered it all. Then came the biggest blow. Aretha passed away when Ray was 14. He never really got over it. After her funeral, he didn't go back to school. That moment marked the end of childhood and the start of Ray Charles, the legend in the making. A career begins. Ray Charles didn't make it by accident. He built it from the bottom, with no backup plan and $4 gigs. After dropping out of school following his mother's death, Ray headed to Jacksonville, Florida, where he crashed with an old family friend and hustled his way onto the music scene, starting with house gigs at the Ritz Theater. $4 a night might not sound like much now, but back then, it was barely enough for bus fare and a sandwich. Still, Ray used every second to sharpen his sound. He joined the local musicians union and used their piano for practice since he didn't have one at home. If another player dropped a slick lick, Ray was already figuring out how to play it before they even finished. But let's be real, grinding in Jacksonville didn't feed him fast enough. So, by 16, he was in Orlando, broke and hungry. Literally. Days without food. Yet he kept pushing. He started arranging pop tunes for local bands and shot his shot with a big-name act, Lucky Millender's band, No Dice. But rejection didn't stop him. Next stop, Tampa. 2 jobs, including one with the Honey Dippers, where he got paid and exposure. It was also during this time that Ray started sounding a whole lot like Nat King Cole, a smart move for gigs, but eventually he wanted to be himself, not a knockoff. In 1948, Ray set his sights on Seattle. This was a smaller scene with a big opportunity. He linked up with friends, formed the McSun Trio, and played a graveyard shift at the Rocking Chair Club. Not glamorous, but it worked. Their track Confession Blues hit number 2 on the R&B chart, Ray's first national hit. By the early 50s, Ray was in LA, backing up blues legend Lowell Fulson and arranging for other artists. He got signed to Swing Time, and then Atlantic snatched up his contract for 20 fun. Hits like Mess Around, I've Got a Woman, and What Did I Say exploded off the charts. He fused gospel, jazz, and blues into something no one else was doing. Continued success. Ray Charles didn't just change music, he changed the business of music, starting with one of the smartest moves an artist could make, owning his own masters. In 1959, when most artists were signing away their rights faster than they could say royalties, Ray walked into ABC Paramount and walked out with a deal that made industry heads spin. ABC offered him an unheard-of contract at the time, a fat upfront advance, better royalty rates, and ownership of his recordings. Translation: Ray wasn't just making hits, he was keeping the keys to the vault. And he wasted no time delivering. His very first release with ABC, Georgia on My Mind. A cover, sure, but Ray flipped it into an emotional powerhouse. That song became the actual state anthem of Georgia 2 decades later. Not bad for a track originally written back when radios were still furniture. But Ray was just getting warmed up. He followed it with Hit the Road Jack, another banger that snagged a Grammy and cemented his crossover status. By 1961, Ray had leveled up his band, turning his small group into a full-blown touring machine. He wasn't playing clubs anymore. He was headlining jazz festivals in Europe and selling out theaters. Still, success wasn't without drama. In '61, during a stop in Indiana, police searched his hotel and found drugs. The charges didn't stick due to a warrant issue, but the warning signs were there. Not long after, he survived a terrifying plane incident where ice completely blocked the pilot's view. Ray later said something divine helped clear just enough space to land. Say what you want, but the man had stories. Then came modern sounds in country and Western music, a bold, genre-busting move that sent him straight to #1 on the pop charts. Nobody expected a black R&B artist to turn country songs into platinum gold, but Ray wasn't asking for permission. He launched his own label, kept racking up hits, and even found his way back after another brush with addiction in the mid-60s. By the time I Don't Need No Doctor and Crying Time hit, Ray had made yet another comeback, and yes, he made that look cool too. Final years. In 2003, after undergoing hip surgery, Ray had plans to hit the road again because sitting still was never his thing, but his health had other ideas. By mid-2004, liver issues started catching up with him. On June 10, 2004, the world lost one of its most iconic voices when Ray passed away at 73 in his Beverly Hills home. But Ray, being Ray, he still had one more masterpiece up his sleeve. 2 months after his passing, his final album, Genius Loves Company, dropped. And let's just say this wasn't some quiet farewell project. It was a lineup. We're talking duets with legends like B.B. King, Willie Nelson, Natalie Cole, Elton John, Gladys Knight, and Norah Jones, just to name a few. These weren't just collaborations. They were musical love letters from artists who admired him and grew up on his sound. The album was a smash. It cleaned up at the Grammys, winning 8 awards, including Album of the Year and Record of the Year. His duet with Norah Jones, Here We Go Again, swept the pop categories, while his gospel performance with Gladys Knight hit right in the soul. One of the most emotional moments? A duet with Johnny Mathis on Over the Rainbow, which played at Ray's memorial service, which seemed to be a full-circle moment for a man who spent his life blending genres, emotions, and cultures like it was second nature. His funeral, held at the First AME Church in Los Angeles, was packed with music royalty. Stevie Wonder, B.B. King, Wynton Marsalis, and Glenn Campbell all performed tributes. It wasn't a sad goodbye, it was a celebration. The kind Ray would have wanted. Real music, real feelings, no fluff. Ray was laid to rest at Inglewood Park Cemetery, but his voice, still everywhere. Whether it's a country ballad, a jazz classic, or a soul-shaking duet, Ray Charles didn't just leave a legacy, he lived it until the last note. Artists he hated. Now that we've covered Ray's rise to icon status, let's talk about the folks who didn't make his personal playlist. These are the 7 artists he openly disliked, and trust me, he had his reasons. Some of them, brutal. Let's get into it. Elvis. Ray Charles didn't need to call out Elvis Presley by name to make his point, but when he did, it wasn't petty, it was personal, and it was about way more than music. See, Ray didn't hate Elvis the man. What he couldn't stand was what Elvis represented, a system that gave a crown to a white kid from Mississippi, while the black pioneers who built the stage were left standing in the wings. Elvis was called a trailblazer for moves black performers had been doing in churches, juke joints, and basements for generations. To Ray, Elvis wasn't a thief. The culture had been boxed, packaged, and handed to him by an industry that had no time for the people who actually created it. And while Ray admitted the guy had talent, he was never bitter about that. He couldn't ignore the double standard. Elvis could shake his hips and break hearts on national TV. Nat King Cole did the same thing and got run out of town. Ray had sung gospel in churches with broken ceilings and played piano in clubs that wouldn't even let him use the front door. Meanwhile, Elvis hit the airwaves with that same energy and was instantly branded a musical messiah. Ray didn't want his name next to Elvis's on a marquee, not because of ego, but because he knew how that pairing would erase the truth behind the sound. Ray once refused to perform on a television show that would have featured Elvis, not because he was being difficult, but because he wasn't about to play into the image that music could be separated from its roots just because someone more marketable was singing it. Ray's real issue wasn't just with Elvis. It was with the erasure, the silence, the ongoing applause for the messenger while the message was buried. He knew the industry loved to repackage black brilliance as something new when someone paler presented it. So, no, Elvis didn't have to be the villain. He just had to show up, smile, and shake. And for Ray Charles, that was enough to put him at the top of a list he rarely made, but never forgot. Barry Manilow. To Ray Charles, music wasn't meant to sparkle, it was meant to bleed. So when he heard a Barry Manilow song one morning in Atlanta, fresh coffee in hand, he paused. Not because it was bad, but because it was too good. Notes hit with machine-like precision, every syllable manicured like it came from a recording booth, sanitized with hand sanitizer. Ray sipped, frowned, and muttered to his bandmate, "Sounds like plastic wrap. You can see it, touch it, but it doesn't feel like anything." Now, Ray didn't beef with Barry Manilow personally. This wasn't about Manilow the man. It was about Manilow, the musical mood board. Ray had grown up on back porch harmonicas and broken piano strings. He played through pain, loss, and joy that cracked his voice just enough to make it mean something. So when he heard music that felt like it had been auto-tuned straight out of a showroom floor, he didn't just skip it, he felt personally offended. To Ray, soulless music was worse than a sour note. It was a betrayal. He'd lost his sight before he was 7, and back then, sound was his lifeline. He didn't care if a note was bent or the beat stumbled. He cared if it felt alive. Music that tried too hard to be perfect, in his mind, missed the point entirely. Once, a producer pitched a duet idea. Ray Charles and Barry Manilow, two legends, one track. Ray blinked, smirked, and said, "He ain't dirty enough for me." He didn't mean Barry needed a criminal record. He meant he needed some grit, some soul that couldn't be edited out in post-production. Ray called that kind of music showroom sound. He felt it was pretty to look at, but it had no heartbeat inside. In his notebook, he once wrote, "Some folks sell albums, some sell truth, some just sell polish." Guess which category he put Barry in? Ray didn't hate Barry Manilow, he just didn't press play again. Not because it was offensive, but because it wasn't real enough to stay in the room. Pat Boone. Ray Charles didn't have to say it outright. Every time that voice came on the radio, Ray would go stone silent. No eye roll, no rant, just a quiet click and the music stopped. That was all the commentary he needed. Whenever Boone's version of a black artist's song floated through the air, Ray would mutter, "There's that white boy singing it back again." Not angry, just tired. Tired of hearing the same pain repackaged without any of the scars. Ray never accused Pat Boone of stealing. He knew Boone didn't write, "Ain't That a Shame" or "Tutti Frutti." But what cut deep wasn't just the covers. It was the fact that Boone's voice, so clean it could pass a health inspection, got radio spins, while the original artists barely got a shout-out. In the 1950s, Ray was grinding it out in smoky southern bars, while Boone was on TV in crisp white suits, crooning songs that weren't his but somehow became acceptable once they passed through his mouth. Same melody, different skin. That's all it took. Ray once said Boone sounded like someone reading another man's speech. Not wrong, but not rooted. It wasn't personal, it was simply systemic. Boone didn't create the rules, he just benefited from them, repeatedly. At an event in the 80s, Boone walked up to greet Ray. Friendly smile, hand extended. Ray didn't shake it. He didn't cause a scene. He just lifted his glasses, stared into the middle distance, and turned away. When someone asked later if he had a problem with Boone, Ray just said, "I don't know him. I just know his voice was played instead of my friend's." That wasn't shade, it was truth. Ray wasn't asking for revenge. He wasn't bitter. He just wanted people to stop pretending it was fair, to stop calling it a coincidence when the airwaves favored polish over passion. When Boone became a household name while the architects of the music remained invisible. Pat Boone is still alive. His records still sit on gift shop shelves. But listen close, and you'll hear what Ray heard. Something missing. Not the melody, not the words, just the soul, the part you can't fake. Kenny G. At a jazz legends party in '99, he stood up, leaned on his cane, and said with a smile, "If Charlie Parker came back today and heard what's on the radio, he'd toss his horn into the nearest river." People laughed. Ray didn't. He never called anyone out by name. But let's not play coy. Everyone in the room knew who he meant. Kenny G. To Ray, Kenny G wasn't a villain. Kenny was something worse, harmless. The saxophone star had the hair, the hits, and the household recognition. But for Ray, his smooth jazz sound wasn't music. All it was background noise dressed in expensive cologne. Ray came up in smoky clubs, playing for people who needed music to feel something, not nod politely over dinner rolls. He didn't hate Kenny G's success, he just hated what it represented. A version of jazz so soft, it couldn't bruise a peach. In a private conversation with a drummer buddy, Ray once said, "He doesn't break rules, he just makes everything easy." That right there, that was the wound. Because to Ray, jazz had to be difficult, gritty, something you wrestle with before it rewards you, not a genre you smooth out until it fits in a shopping mall. Ray didn't slam Kenny G for being talented. He never claimed he couldn't play, but he did make it clear. Jazz isn't supposed to tuck you in at night. No way. It's supposed to make you sit up straight and listen. In a late interview, when someone asked Ray about the future of jazz, he shot back, "As long as it doesn't get rocked to sleep, we're fine." When they asked if he listened to Kenny G, Ray grinned and said, "Only when I want to forget who I am." That line hit like a cymbal crash. For Ray, music was the one thing that never lied to him after he lost his sight. It told him the world was still spinning, but only if it had scars, scratches, and soul. And to him, Kenny G's jazz was too perfect, to be honest. David Bowie. To Ray, music had to be lived, not performed like a monologue. So when Bowie stepped on stage looking like a space alien or a gender-fluid wizard, Ray's reaction, something like, "All right, but is this real, or just a dress rehearsal with a budget?" Now, don't get it twisted, Ray wasn't against innovation. He broke more musical rules than most artists ever learn. But the line for Ray was clear, you gotta mean it. Bowie's ever-shifting personas, Ziggy, the Thin White Duke, Aladdin Sane, felt more like theater than testimony. Ray reportedly once said, "He's an actor trying on music like a costume. That ain't my kind of art." That's the thing about Ray. He came from a world where songs were soaked in sweat and struggle. You didn't just sing about heartbreak, you bled on the track. You didn't wear pain, you carried it. Ray's music was gospel-rooted and blues-built, the kind of sound that doesn't come with glitter. So, while Bowie fans praised his creativity and edge, Ray sat back with his sunglasses on and asked, "Cool, but where's the soul?" It wasn't a dig at talent. Bowie had plenty. It was a critique of intention. Ray saw the difference between pushing boundaries and playing pretend. And honestly, Ray probably respected the boldness, even if it rubbed him the wrong way. But where Ray used music to tell his truth, he saw Bowie using it to explore personas. One was gut deep, the other was performance art. There's a difference. One night backstage when Bowie came up in conversation, Ray didn't curse him or roll his eyes. He just chuckled and said, "Man wears a new face every album. I've been wearing the same one my whole life, and I still haven't finished singing about it." That was classic Ray. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet reminder. Real music doesn't need a costume change. So while Bowie lit up stages with his shape-shifting, Ray lit a fire in the listener. And to him, that fire mattered more than any spotlight. Justin Timberlake. When the music industry crowned Justin Timberlake the heir to Michael Jackson's throne, Ray Charles wasn't buying a single note of it. While critics praised Timberlake's slick vocals and sharp moves, Ray saw something else entirely, a performance polished to perfection but devoid of soul. In Ray's world, music was supposed to smell like cigarette smoke and sound like heartache. It came from late nights, missed meals, and piano keys soaked in sweat, not from a marketing team's boardroom strategy. So, when he heard Timberlake's breakout solo hit Cry Me a River in a studio session in 2002, he didn't rant, didn't insult. He just clicked the off button and said, "It's not bad, but it's not alive either." Ray didn't critique technique. He respected skill, but he knew the difference between a singer and a survivor. To him, Justin was the face of a new era, perfectly packaged, flawlessly branded, and emotionally empty. "Where's the scar?" Ray once asked. "Where's the blood?" Not metaphorically, literally. He wanted to feel that someone had suffered to make the song. Ray often said that music wasn't for the stage, it was for the moments when no one's watching. And Timberlake? He was made to be seen, not felt. Smooth, sweet, and safe. Like prepackaged fruit, bright on the outside, flavorless on the inside. It wasn't hate, it was heartbreak. Ray wasn't angry at Justin. He was grieving the vanishing of rawness. The kind of music that wasn't choreographed but crawled out of the blues. He came from an era of hunger, of bootleg whiskey and borrowed time. Justin came from Disney. In an offhanded interview, Ray was once asked what he thought of today's rising stars. He smirked and replied, "Plenty of lights, not much fire." That was Ray's way of saying the room was lit, but nobody was home. So, no. Ray never dragged Timberlake by name. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes, and the one time he did speak, he simply said, "He's not wrong, just not real." Then he walked out of the room and never listened to that track again. Frank Sinatra. They were both kings in their castles. Ray Charles with his gravel-smooth blend of gospel and blues. Frank Sinatra with his velvet voice and cinematic swagger. On the surface, these giants of American music might have seemed like kindred spirits. But behind the stage lights and smiles, Ray harbored a silent but firm distance from old blue eyes. While Ray admired Frank's vocal chops and undeniable stage command, he also had a long memory, and it wasn't filled with martinis and applause. In Ray's eyes, Frank's public support for civil rights in later years came a little too late and felt a little too neat. The words were right, but the conviction? That felt filtered. According to those who knew Ray well, the turning point came in the late 60s at a high-profile Hollywood fundraiser. Ray had just finished a set, only slightly over his time slot, when Sinatra, the event's star attraction, reportedly quipped about keeping the blues guys in check. Meant as a throwaway joke, maybe, but for a man like Ray who clawed his way through a world built to silence him, it cut deep. To him, that offhand remark echoed louder than applause ever could. Ray also never vibed with Frank's need to be the most important person in every room. The glad-handing, the backpats, the public praise that never turned into a real collaboration. It all felt a little too choreographed. Ray called it cigar smoke diplomacy, where the room smells good, everyone's smiling, but the air is still heavy with unspoken bias. He never slammed Frank in interviews, but those close to Ray remember one comment that said everything. Frank sings about pain, but he didn't have to live it like we did. That wasn't bitterness, that was truth. Ray didn't demand applause or titles. He didn't need the red carpets. What did he need? What he respected was grit, experience, music that limped into the room with scars and soul. And while Frank played the role of icon with grace, Ray could never forget that too often, black artists were asked to light the stage, but exit through the kitchen. In Ray's world, real wasn't always pretty, and charm without depth was just another shiny mask.
Bonus, Michael Jackson.
He could have called out the latest pop sensation. But when Ray Charles mentioned Michael Jackson, it wasn't with scorn. It was with sincere and heartfelt heartbreak. Ray wasn't one to shy away from calling out what he saw as hollow artistry. But when it came to Michael, the conversation was different. That kid had it, he reportedly told a friend, speaking of Michael's early days, wide-eyed, full of rhythm, and bursting with raw emotion. There was something real in the boy from Gary, Indiana, a spark that ignited stages and connected with audiences deep in their core. But as the sequins multiplied and the videos got shinier, Ray began to feel like something was missing. It wasn't jealousy. Ray had long since carved out his own legend. It was concern. For Ray, music was never supposed to be about selling illusions. It was supposed to be about truth, flawed, vulnerable, soul-rattling truth. And the more Michael's persona became wrapped in spectacle, the more Ray felt the music was being left behind. He had the fire, Ray admitted, but somewhere in the flashbulbs and fantasy, it got smothered. Still, Ray never dismissed Michael entirely. He never denied his influence, his skill, or the magic he once wielded. But he saw the industry's growing obsession with polish and perfection. This was something Ray had spent his entire life fighting against. He worried that younger generations would believe this was all music had to offer, a performance instead of a prayer. Music to Ray wasn't just entertainment, it was breath, it was survival. It had pulled him through blindness, racism, and addiction. It had spoken when he couldn't, so when he saw it reduced to choreography and commercial gloss, he couldn't stay silent. This isn't hate, he once clarified in a rare interview. This is mourning for what music used to mean. Ray Charles didn't criticize to tear down. He criticized because he cared. Because for him, a song wasn't real unless it could reach inside you, leave a scar, and still sing about it. And with Michael, he simply felt the world had traded too much soul for sparkle. Ray Charles didn't hate for the sake of hating. He loved music too deeply for that. His critiques weren't just about style, they were about soul, truth, and legacy. From polished pop stars to jazz made safe for hotel lobbies, Ray spoke from the scars of a life lived in melody, not marketing. Whether you agree or not, one thing's clear. He believed music should hurt a little. If it doesn't leave a mark, is it even worth remembering? You have to decide for yourself, but we hope the words of the icon have helped you just a little. If you love this and want more of this type of content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives like this.